This is the story of how America was pulled into the deadliest conflict in human history, and how its entry changed everything. We see Hitler's armies crushing Europe, Nazi flags rising over Paris, Japanese forces advancing across Asia, and Britain standing alone against annihilation. America stayed neutral, but tension boiled. Factories whispered with the sound of weapons. Soldiers drilled in empty fields. The world sensed it, the giant was waking. And just when it seemed the storm couldn't grow any darker, an event approached that would rip America into the heart of World War II. A date that would live in infamy. Before Pearl Harbor became a wound in American history, it was a fuse, slowly burning. Japan was expanding fast, Manchuria, China, Southeast Asia. To fuel its empire, it needed oil, and America had it. When the US cut off Japan's oil supply, the Japanese military saw only one path: eliminate American power in the Pacific. Cinematic maps sweep across oceans. Generals whisper over strategy tables. Japanese carriers creep across the water like silent predators. The plan was bold. Impossible. Unthinkable. Cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet in a single strike. Meanwhile, in Hawaii, American sailors lived ordinary Sunday mornings. Coffee. Letters home. Music playing. No one knew that hundreds of Japanese aircraft were slicing through the sky toward them. The tension builds as engines roar louder. Japan was gambling everything, its empire, its future, its pride, on one devastating blow. Cut to American radar operators noticing strange blips. They dismiss it. Training planes, they think. But the storm was seconds away. At 7:48 a.m., the sky over Pearl Harbor exploded. Japanese aircraft burst through the clouds like hawks diving on prey. Bombs screamed downward. Torpedoes sliced across the harbor. Battleships shook as steel met fire. The USS Arizona was lifted out of the water by a catastrophic blast, engulfing hundreds of sailors in seconds. Smoke smothered the sky. Men ran through flames. Boats overturned. Alarms from every direction created a deafening, desperate symphony of chaos. The attack lasted just 2 hours. But it changed the world for decades. President Franklin D. Roosevelt stood before Congress, declaring war with a voice filled with fury and resolve. A date which will live in infamy. America, once reluctant, now entered the war with a storm behind it. Millions volunteered. Factories switched to 24-hour production. Women entered the workforce in record numbers. The sleeping giant had awakened, and it was angry. But America's entry wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival. Japan had struck hard, but Germany was moving too. Hitler believed America would be too slow, too divided. He was wrong. America had entered the war with fury, but fury alone doesn't win global conflict. Factories that once built cars now forged tanks, aircraft, and artillery faster than any nation in history. The assembly lines roared. Sparks flew. Steel transformed into the machines of war. Millions of young men flooded recruitment centers, while millions of women, Rosie the Riveters, took their place in factories, proving the home front was just as powerful as the battlefield. America wasn't preparing for a small fight. It was preparing for a world-shaking, two-front war, Germany in the west, Japan in the east. Meanwhile, convoys crossed the Atlantic, carrying weapons to Britain and the Soviet Union. U-boats prowled beneath the waves, sinking ships in seconds. The ocean became a graveyard of steel and fire. But America kept sending more. Hitler believed the US was too far, too slow, too inexperienced. But in just months, America was producing more than the Axis combined. The sleeping giant wasn't just awake, it was unstoppable. Now, American boots were about to hit the ground. The fight for Europe was coming. Before storming Europe, America needed experience. Real battle. Real fire. North Africa became the proving ground. In 1942, American troops landed under Operation Torch, joining British forces against the German Afrika Korps commanded by General Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox. The desert was unforgiving, scorching heat, sandstorms, endless dunes. Tanks burned in the sun. Soldiers fought dehydration as much as gunfire. At first, the Americans were overwhelmed. Rommel's troops were veterans, fast, brutal, precise. The Battle of Kasserine Pass exposed America's weaknesses. Units collapsed. Communication failed. Morale shook. But Americans learned fast. New leadership, better coordination, stronger supply lines, slowly the tide turned. By May 1943, the Allies crushed the Afrika Korps. It was America's first major victory on land. The world finally realized. The United States was becoming a military superpower. But the next target would be far deadlier. Fortress Europe. Before the Allies could invade Europe, they needed to break its steel backbone, German industry. American B-17 flying fortresses and B-24 Liberators thundered across the sky in massive formations. Hundreds of bombers at a time. Engines roaring like rolling thunder. Their mission, daylight bombing of German factories, railways, and oil fields. The skies over Europe turned into a deadly arena. German flak exploded everywhere, black bursts tearing holes in the air. Fighter planes screamed in from above and below, spraying bullets across the bomber wings. Smoke trails stretched across the horizon. These missions were brutal. Casualties were staggering. Entire crews vanished in seconds, swallowed by fire and steel. But the bombers kept coming. The relentless air assault slowly strangled Germany's war machine. Factories burned. Fuel supplies dried up. Transportation networks collapsed. The skies belonged to America now. And somewhere across the channel, an invasion was being planned. The greatest amphibious assault in history. June 6, 1944. Dawn. A storm of ships, 1,000 strong, stretched across the English Channel. Soldiers huddled inside landing craft, seasick, terrified, and silent. Above them, Allied aircraft darkened the sky. Ahead was Normandy, and the walls of Hitler's Fortress Europe. When the ramps dropped, hell erupted. Machine guns tore through the waves. Explosions threw men into the air. Bodies hit the sand as soldiers crawled behind steel obstacles. Smoke, blood, and chaos filled the beach. But inch by inch, yard by yard, they pushed forward. The Americans at Omaha Beach faced the worst. Cliffs filled with German guns. Sand littered with the fallen. Yet by sheer will, courage, and impossible determination, the beachhead was secured. By nightfall, 156,000 Allied troops were in France. D-Day wasn't just a battle. It was the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. But the road to victory was still long, and drenched in sacrifice. After breaking out from Normandy, American forces surged across France like an unstoppable tide. Towns were liberated. German lines cracked. The enemy was retreating, but it wasn't done yet. Hitler launched a desperate counterattack in the winter of 1944, the Battle of the Bulge. Snow-covered forests. Whiteout blizzards. Ambush after ambush. American troops fought surrounded, freezing, and outnumbered. But they held. When asked to surrender, General McAuliffe sent one legendary word. Nuts. Reinforcements smashed through the snow, driving the Germans back. After the Bulge, Germany's fate was sealed. American tanks crossed the Rhine. Allied troops marched toward Berlin. Cities lay in ruins. Resistance crumbled. In April 1945, Hitler's empire collapsed. But across the world, another fire still burned. The war in the Pacific. While Europe burned, American forces were also locked in a brutal campaign across the Pacific. An ocean turned into a battlefield. Tiny islands became fortresses. Every mile was paid for in blood. Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima. These were not just battles, they were nightmares. Japanese troops fought to the last breath, hidden in tunnels, caves, and bunkers. Kamikaze pilots turned their planes into living bombs. The heat was suffocating, the jungles thick, the waters filled with danger. The most defining struggle came at Iwo Jima. Black volcanic sand. Endless gunfire. The iconic flag raising atop Mount Suribachi became a symbol of sacrifice, courage, and the cost of victory. But even after these islands fell, Japan refused to surrender. The closer America came, the fiercer the resistance grew. The war was reaching its darkest moment. 6 months after Pearl Harbor, America faced Japan in a showdown that would decide the fate of the Pacific, the Battle of Midway. American codebreakers had cracked Japan's secret plans. The U.S. Navy knew exactly where and when Japan would strike. It was the perfect trap. On June 4, 1942, American aircraft launched from carriers and dove on the Japanese fleet. Bombs punched through decks. Fuel ignited. In minutes, 3 Japanese carriers were burning. A 4th followed shortly after. Japan had lost the core of its naval power. Midway transformed the Pacific War. For the first time, Japan was on the defensive. The United States, once wounded and underestimated, now controlled the ocean. But the final decision, how to end the war, would ignite one of the most controversial moments in human history. By 1945, Japan was cornered but unbroken. Millions more lives could be lost if the U.S. invaded the home islands. American leaders faced an impossible decision. Then came the moment that changed the world forever. On August 6, 1945, the B-29 Enola Gay released a single bomb over Hiroshima. A blinding flash. A rising fireball. Shockwaves leveling the city. 3 days later, Nagasaki suffered the same fate. Silence fell across Japan. The devastation forced surrender. World War II, the deadliest conflict in human history, was finally over. But the world had entered the nuclear age. Nothing would ever be the same. America entered World War II reluctantly. But it emerged transformed. Its industry became the engine of Allied victory. Its soldiers helped liberate continents. Its technology reshaped global warfare forever. From the beaches of Normandy to the jungles of the Pacific, from Arctic convoys to carrier battles, America's involvement changed the direction of the war and the future of the world. When the guns finally fell silent in 1945, 2 superpowers remained, the United States and the Soviet Union. The world map had been redrawn. The global balance of power had shifted. But the legacy of the war was written not just in strategy, but in sacrifice, millions of Americans who served, fought, and never returned. This is the story of how a nation awoke from isolation, entered the inferno, and helped end the greatest conflict mankind has ever known. Thank you for watching this historical story. If you want more cinematic stories from history, don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.